Once I do a printout, I like to trim the page to within 1/4 of an inch of the outside of the design. And I mean, you don't have to do this, but it gives you a real good idea of the scaling of the design. And it doesn't have to be exact if you do this, but it just gives me peace of mind that where I think it's going to stitch, it is, I can see how big it's going to be. So there are, you can't see them, but there are crosshairs on here. And I just go 1/4 of an inch outside the largest part of the design. So this is going to go in the hoop, and it's going to sit right like this. So we're going to tape the edge of the fabric to the stabilizer, and then this is going to sit just right on the edge of that fabric, and that's the way it's supposed to be, so that when we put the border on, we capture the side of the fleece into the seam allowance with the border. And where this crosshair is, if you fold it, this is what I really like about Embroidery. I mean, a lot of software has the ability to print designs, and it just lets you audition the design on the fabric. You can also use Designs and Machine Embroidery's print and stick target paper. Okay, fold this down. I need a sticker. This is a target sticker from Designs and Machine Embroidery. It has a little arrow that tells you which way is up. So I can put this here and fold this over just like this, and then I can take the sticker and put it right and align it just with that quadrant of the sticker under that corner of the paper. So now I know the sticker's in the center, and I can tell exactly where to make sure that is the center of the design. And if your machine has a crosshair that it can drop in the center of the design, then this is where you'll put it. So let's go ahead and get this hooped. I am just going to use some no-show poly mesh. This is a Cutaway, and let me back up a little bit. I measure it by just putting my hoop on it, the bottom part of the hoop on it, and then making a cut so I know it's going to fit. Layer it over it so I have plenty of stabilizer on all sides. There, that's nice and tight. And then tighten it. See how smooth that is? That's perfect. And we're going to float this. I don't recommend hooping that. Yeah, you'll drive yourself crazy if you try to do that. I'm not using the sticky they recommend either. This is a screwdriver. For brother has this. My hands aren't strong enough to tighten that screw. This is a Designs and Machine Embroidery hoop mat. It's silicone. I absolutely love it. It prevents your hoop from sliding around, and it's got nice dark lines. This thing is amazing, and it will help so much as you try to hoop your projects and get them straight. I am looking for center, and it's really easy to see because I can see the marks on the edge, and I got this crosshair here. And then I am going to take this, and it does not have to be exact because it's not going to stitch real close to the edge, but I'm going to kind of fold it back here a little bit and try to get as close to center as possible. Okay, and get it fairly straight. And then I'm going to take pins and I'm going to pin it. This is how you float. Don't put any pins down here. This is where the design is going to go. I'm going to spray a little sulky KK2000, or you can use 505 on this. I do not care for that Dritz quilt basting spray. The fumes on that is just horrendous. I'm going to spray it on the stabilizer, not on the fabric. Let me put that down nice and smooth. There. That will not gum up your needle. It works great. Okay. To prevent the foot from going up under the fabric, we're going to use some paper tape. This is made by 3M. I've got a link to it in my Amazon store. It works really well. I'm doing not quite 1/4 of an inch, a little bit more than 1/8, something like that. And I'm doing it less than 1/4 of an inch because it can be difficult to pull this tape out of the stitches once you're done. And so if it gets caught up in, you want it to get caught up inside the seam allowance, and it will not add any bulk to your design at all. So there we go. Okay, we have center marked on the design from the printed tape template. We've got some 505. You can use 505 or KK2000 spray to keep your fabric nice and smooth. And we have taped down the edge and pinned the top, and we are ready to get stitching. Okay, I need to pull up the design, and I'm going to go to embroidery. It is in, I'm going to touch the pocket for memory. I sent it over wirelessly, so I'm going to touch the wireless icon and look for my design. There he is. And hit set. All right, we're ready to go. The first stitch is going to be the placement line for the fleece. So I'm going to flop this over. My machine is already threaded with black thread. I'm using Dimes exquisite thread. I really like it. And I'm going to do it in black so that you guys can see it. Now, make sure all the time, when you remove this hoop out of your machine, you always want to make sure that you get your hand under there and do kind of a sweep and make sure, just even if you think you can see it all, you never know what's been tucked up under there, and you don't want to mess that up and sew your the back of your project. I don't need to do anything with it here at all. I'm not going to do any editing. So I'm just going to touch embroidery. See how as soon as I touched embroidery, now it knows where it needs to move to center first. It did not move to the first stitch in the design, but it did move to center. And I kind of guesstimated its center. I got pretty good. On the luminaire, this very first icon up here in the top corner, whoop, has a W on it, and let me get in where you can see that. That's the W foot, that's your embroidery foot, and if you touch that first button, it's going to give you a crosshair. Let me get you in here real close. Can you see the crosshair? I don't know if you, I think you can. See that green crosshair? That was really close, and so all I need to do now is move it just a little bit. So I'm going to touch the layout button on the screen, and I'm going to touch the move button, and I'm going to nudge it with the directional arrows until I get right up on center. That's pretty close, and one over. Oh, that's it. That's real close to what I'm looking for, and I think that's going to work out just fine. So I'm going to remove the sticker, and we are ready to go. So I'm just going to, I'm going to back out a little bit so you can see it a little bit better, I think. And I'm just going to touch the green button and go. Yep, that's exactly what I'm looking for. See how it's stitching exactly in that 1/4 inch seam allowance, both sides. That's the placement line for the fleece. That's perfect. See, this is the benefit to printing it out ahead of time, so you know exactly where your design is going to stitch. I'm going to change my thread colors now because I need white. When I change my thread colors, I do it like the professionals do. I will cut it up here, and if you are just now threading your machine for the first time, I recommend you get your book and follow the thread the way it tells you to thread it. The brothers all have, the Brother and Baby Lock machines all have a numbering system to show you how to thread. And you just follow the threads around. And the way I do it is I just put my 2 thread ends together and twist it and then do a single loop. Okay? So you really only need to run it through the numbering track one time and then pull it. And I do like to put my thread through the top thread guide that is usually really for making a bobbin. I just like that. Okay? And I'm going to thread my needle. I'm using an Oregon 7511 embroidery needle. I have on a 90 weight bobbin. If you do have one of these machines, you will see a preview of what is about to stitch, and this tells me that this is going to be the placement line for the fleece. I'm just going to hit go. If it doesn't pull all the way down in, don't worry about that. You can trim it in a minute. Glasses. Now you can't see it real well because it's white, but what you want to do is take your fabric. This is the regular way of doing applique embroidery. I'm going to trim this little tail that didn't get pulled down in. And it is to lay the fabric make sure it covers the entire placement stitch. And I'm doing this because I did not pre-cut my piece. And you know what? I can see through that, and I don't think I like to be able to see through it. Okay, I don't want to be able to see my fabric underneath my fleece, so I have a piece of Cutaway Stabilizer. You cannot tear this stuff. It's very, very tough. So I'm going to put this Cutaway Stabilizer under my fleece, and that's going to make it opaque enough that you can't see it. Now, you can tape this down. I'm just going to leave mine. I think it'll stitch just fine. And this is going to be the tack down stitch. Just make sure whatever fabric you're using completely covers the placement stitch. Okay, if you use this method for the applique, now it's time to remove the hoop and trim the excess fabric and stabilizer if you used it away from the tack down stitch. You want to use a real good pair of curved scissors. These are Gingers. They're not cheap, but don't go cheap when you buy these, because this pair has lasted me 10 years or more already, and they don't hurt my fingers. You also want to make sure you've got something firm underneath your hoop. If you pop your project out of the hoop, you'll have to start all over. But I'm going to trim this, and you trim it by holding it up straight, and then you want to keep the flat part right here flat against the hoop, flat against the stabilizer. You don't want to do this without having something under your hoop. And trim it right close to the stitching. Usually the final satin stitch is about 3 millimeters in length. That's about industry standard. And so that 3 millimeters, or in width, that 3 millimeters will cover the edge of your fabric pretty well. There, that looks great. Now I have a nice fuzzy snowman. I'm going to put the hoop back into the machine. And I'm going to take my fabric and flop it on top of the hoop, just like that. That way when you put it back into the machine, there's no chance of your fabric getting caught up underneath. And it is time for the placement stitch for the hat. So I'm going to do another thread color change. Twist them together, do a single loop, and then reach in front of the needle and grab the thread. You can't pull the knot through the eye of the needle, so you just want to pull it like that. Okay, and thread the needle. This is the placement line for the hat. Okay, I have my little hat, and I'm going to take it over to the ironing board and I'm going to iron it within the placement line. Okay. Clicking the plus sign twice on the Kimberbell design applique turned out to be just perfect. I think it'll fit just fine. If you don't have pre-cut pieces, now is when you would put your fabric over your placement line and then stitch the tack down stitch. I'm going to stitch the tack down stitch even though it's got heat and bond on the back, because I want to make sure that the outside of the applique is not larger than the 3 millimeter width of the satin stitch. If it is, I'll do some micro trimming. Yeah, that looks really good. I could even have gone +3 clicks on the scan and cut, but this will be fine. Okay, next is the placement line for the nose, and I need an orange. I don't know if you can see it. I'll pick this up. I have a thread tree behind my embroidery machine, and that's where the orange is patiently waiting. So I like to put any threads right there that are more than the 2 that are in place on my machine itself. And here's the placement line for the nose. I really don't want to iron on top of the fleece, so I have put a little Elmer's glue stick in on the back of the nose. So right here I can tell it didn't capture that, but that's all right. I've got a little bit extra fabric here than I would prefer, so I'm going to trim that out without cutting the fleece. Looks good. Again, 3 millimeters is pretty wide, but all right, now it's going to do the satin stitch for the nose. So I'm just going to hit the button and go. It will do a zigzag around it first to secure all the edges. Yeah, that captured that pretty good. Looks good. While that's going on, let me show you what we're looking at here on the screen. On this screen, I'm really paying attention to these up here. This tells me my hoops that I can use. This tells me the design is 7.57 by 5.13. It tells me we're on 2090 of 6920 stitches. We have 8 thread color changes, so we're on number 8 out of 11, and we are 4 minutes into a 14-minute stitch out. And then as we come down here, as we've been going through this, when you see this, even though it says Sulky and I'm using Exquisite, it does not matter what the thread brand is at all, because you can put whatever thread in your machine that you want. This came up as Sulky. Whoops, what did I do? I touched something. Let me hit the button again. This tells me that this stitch right here is going to take 2 minutes. This right here, that's the white that's going to go around the snowman. That's going to take 2 minutes. See how it just jumped? And then right here you can see the preview. I need to do a thread color change to white, and the stitch around the hat is going to take 7 minutes, and then the last stitch, it says 1 minute, and that's going to be the 2 little eyes. So that's pretty much what that tells you. This button down here on Brother and Baby Lock machines is very important. This is your needle plus minus, or minus plus as the case may be. If I touch that, so let's say I made a mistake right now, okay, and I wanted to go back. I need to pay attention that I am at stitch 2440 right there, all right? So if I remove the hoop and fix anything and I made a boo-boo at 2440, I can go plus or minus in stitches forwards and backwards using this menu right here with the numbers, and then here these little arrows, and yours might just have a thread spool with a plus or a minus next to it. But look, I can go backwards, so we're on the white part around the snowman. If I hit the, see, we just went back to stitch 1273, which is the start of the satin stitch for the nose. So if you need to go forward or backwards, if you have a boo-boo, or if you have a thread break, you would want to back up 20 to 30 stitches and then start again. So I'm going to hit the down arrow, means to jump forward 1 thread color. So these numbers are moving individual stitches forwards or backwards, and these up here are moving thread spools, thread colors forward or backwards. Very, very handy. And then to get out of it, you can just press OK, and we're back to where we were. You really need to know that your machine, regardless of brand, should have that function for you to be able to go forwards or backwards if you make a boo-boo. Now this is gonna, once it finishes this satin stitch right here, it's gonna cut the thread and it's gonna jump over here and start over here. If your machine does not automatically cut the thread, it's gonna loosen the tension discs on the top up in here and on the bobbin. It's going to release all of that. See that? That's called a jump thread. And the digitizer did not tell the machine to cut the jump thread, because my machine will cut jump threads, but the digitizer didn't tell it to do that. Whenever you're doing embroidery, if you have jump threads, before you go to your next color, you definitely want to trim those threads, because you don't want them to get caught up underneath some stitches and then you won't have trouble getting them out. All right, I'm going to cut this. Now the machine says to use a gray here. I'm not going to. I'm going to do the next stitches around the hat and the little eyes in black, the same color. So I'm going to change out my thread colors. This is really so simple, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy applique. Okay, I'm ready to trim this away. Make sure to remove the mat. That is not a cutting mat. You will slice into it. So I'm going to pop this out of the hoop. It's kind of tight still. I've removed the pins already. And if you are doing it in a single needle, you will do the exact same thing again, doing the placement and taping down the sides and everything on the other 3. But all I'm going to do now is take my rotary cutter and very carefully go right along the edge of the fabric. Cut this. See, I'm not even really gonna, I mean, I can remove this tape. But when you remove the tape, you run the risk of fraying the fabric, and I don't want to do that. So you can use a ruler if you want. I'm just eyeballing this because the no-show poly mesh is going to be not seen. This is nice. And then here, I'm just going to take my shears and trim right around the outside of the outer stitch line. I did not put any kind of like SF101 on the back of this. I certainly could have, but I didn't see the need. I think that it's going to be fine just like it is. Yep, I think that'll be good. Now, I was thinking about using clear blue tiles and stitching inside here first before I did the applique. But, I mean, you certainly could do some background stitching in the middle of this before you do that. And then I was going to stipple using the luminaire on these outside pieces out here. You know, this is kind of bumpy. Maybe we do need some SF101 on the back of these. Yeah, I think I'm going to do that. SF101 is a, where is it? Let's see. So SF101 is Shape Flex 101. Let me show you. It has a pink label. It's a Pellon product, and it's an iron-on. So I'm going to cut enough of it, maybe to just do the whole thing here. I don't like this satin stitching right here really bubbled this up, and you won't get that bubbling and puckering if you've got SF101 on the back of your fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and put SF101 on the back of this, on the back of the whole thing, because some of this goes up onto this part right here. Let me show you. Since the hat, some of it goes up onto the middle part on this, I'm going to go ahead and do SF101 on the back of this entire piece. I should have done it beforehand, but it is salvageable, not that big of a deal. Sometimes you kind of do everything on the fly. That's okay. Okay, so we have got one corner done, and this was done on the single needle machine on the Brother Luminaire. And now I'm going to do the other 3 corners on the multi-needle, and I didn't specify when we started, but I'm going to add it in here now just in case you did not see that part. Go ahead and take some SF101, Pellon SF101, and iron it to the back of your design. On the single needle, I did notice some puckering, and I don't think that would have happened if I'd have put SF101 on the back. That is not part of the instructions, but I think you're going to be a lot happier with the stitch out. So let's get to this and get it all set up. I'm going to set it up very much like I did the one on the single needle, but again, if you did not see that because you only have a multi-needle and chose not to watch that part, then this is how I'm going to set up all of the other 3 corners for a multi-needle. I'm going to measure, this is no-show poly mesh, and I'm going to measure it by just putting my hoop on top of it. This is the, I think it's the 300 or 360 by 200. This is for the Brother PR 1055 multi-needle, the 10 needle. And I'm going to do it exactly like I did the single needle. I will hoop the stabilizer and then float it. Okay. You want to hoop that pretty tight. And I'm going to screw this pretty tightly. All right. I'm going to use the Dime hoop mat. I absolutely love this thing. It's silicone. and it prevents your hoop from moving. I mean, it lifts up really easy, but as soon as it's on there, look, I'm moving my my cutting board, my cutting mat before I'm moving my embroidery hoop. So I'm putting side to side, top to bottom, and getting it square on the mat. There's a nice, let me show you, there's a nice dark line on this mat. These are wonderful. If I have to find center, then I definitely will use this mat. Sometimes center doesn't matter because you're doing an in the hoop project, but other times it does. Now, what we need to do on this is you would want to print out your design. I printed this out in Embrilliance. I will put a link to Embrilliance Express, and you can print from Embrilliance Express if you don't have any embroidery software. But I think you ought to look into getting Embrilliance Essentials. I think you will absolutely love it. Now we need to put the orientation of the snowman the correct way, and they want you to put this right angle line right here needs to line up exactly with the edge of the fabric, and that way your white fabric for the snowman will be captured inside of the seam allowance, and that's where they want that. And then what I do is the printout has crosshairs on it. Can you see the crosshairs? Okay, so it's got crosshairs on it, and I pre-fold. So once I put this line and this line, these are the marking lines to align your design with the edge of the fabric, and I can see it right here and right here. That's pretty close. Okay, that's exactly where I want it. Now I'm going to fold it in half, and I'm going to fold it in half, and this is the center of the design right there at that tip. And I am taking a Designs and Machine Embroidery Target sticker. It has an arrow on it so you know which way is up. And I'm going to place this so that the bottom left quadrant of the target sticker is exactly lined up with the bottom left quadrant of the paper. So I'll show you again how I do that. You want to pre-fold your paper so it folds easily. Okay, it's really easy to fold it over. You want to get it in the right orientation so that the line is even with the edge of the fabric. I can feel the edge of the fabric underneath. I'm going to fold it over and then fold it over again in half and in half. So now it's in quarters. And then I put the dime target sticker so that it, let me hold it up so you can see. I do it, let me put it so you can see exactly what I'm talking. I don't want this to move around. You stay right there. Okay, can you see the target sticker? I put this, so I fold it so that the quarter of the pattern is in the lower quadrant of the alignment sticker. Okay, that's how you figure out where center is. Then you want to take your alignment sticker and you want to put it into the center of your hoop. And I can tell center because I have my markings on my hoop. There's little nubs right here and right here. And I've got those on the dark lines. And then you want to use either Sulky's KK2000 or some 505 spray. Either one will work fine. And I'm going to float this in the hoop. Now I'm going to put the target sticker with the arrow kind of going to the side, and I just have to remember to rotate the design. I want the majority of the table topper to hang off the front of the machine. That's something you kind of have to take into consideration when you are doing multi-needle designs, is you want the majority of your fabric to hang off the front of the machine so it doesn't get bunched up in the back. So that means, now see, I could do it this way, that will be fine, but then I'm gonna have all of this back here because this is the back of the machine to me, and I can do it this way. And that's fine. Either way is fine. I'm going to have the majority of it over here in the front to me, and then it will be upside down on the screen. And either way you want to do it is okay. But so I'm going to point it this way, so the head is going to my right, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball center. It does not have to be exact, because on this multi-needle I can do a crosshair and get it exactly where I want it. And now I'm going to do the pinning for the float. Now you need to make sure that wherever you pin it, the needle is not going to hit it. So if you want to put your design back on there, you can. I'm going to move this so it doesn't fall. It's falling off my table. Let me see. And that's still pretty correct. Again, it does not have to be exact, because we have positioning tools on the machine itself we're going to use. So I'm just going to pin the topper to the stabilizer, okay? I want to get it pretty close. This is exactly the way I did it for the single needle. All right, and right here, I'm going to spray the stabilizer and then smooth this out on it. And that's going to help that to stay in place. Great. And it came through a little bit. That's fine. I've got sticky on here. That happens. That's okay. So I'm going to smooth this. Now that I have this done, although my material is stuck pretty much, I'm going to go ahead and use some paper tape. This is 3M tape. I've got it in my Amazon store. The link is below the video. And I'm just going to put it within 1/4 of an inch. You don't want it to be any more than 1/4 of an inch over on the edge of your fabric, because if you don't get it all off, the tape will be caught up inside the seam allowance. So this is good. Just like that. So now you really don't have to worry so much on a multi-needle, because the foot is not traveling around on the fabric. The foot is going up and down like this, and generally will not get caught up underneath an edge, but you never know. So we're just going to leave that like that. And we are ready to go to the machine. You will need to have the 3 colors that you need for your snowman already loaded on your machine, and it doesn't matter what spool, and I will show you why here in just a minute. Okay, I'm going to go through the process here and show you how I change out my threads. I'm just going to use, I have white on number 6 already, and I need orange and I need gold. So I pull up some extra from the spool that was already there. And here's the gold. I've got a little gold Santa hat for this particular snowman. And I'm going to put it on spool number 1, and I just tie just like on a single needle, I just tie them one time in a loop, little loop knot. Immediately I will pull it from in front of the needle right away so that I don't forget that I did that. And then I let it hang. So I know I need to pull that one through, and then I need my orange. I'll put that on spool number 2. I don't have any thread brand identified in my thread settings at all. I don't think, because I don't really care what thread brand. I am using Exquisite, Dimes Exquisite, and Isacord. Okay, and there's my orange. So I need black, white, orange, and gold. White is on 6 and black is on 5. I need to thread my needles, and I usually do that from highest number to lowest just because I'm right-handed. It's going to move around and go through its initial thing. And this icon right here is the hoop with the 2 needles is to thread needles. And I have number 2 in my hand, so I'm going to touch 2. And I'm going to touch the needle threader button. Okay, I have the design on a USB, so I'm going to touch the symbol for USB, which is that little trident. And it is right here. And I'm going to tell it set. Now, if you recall, I need to rotate this, and I'm going to put my hoop in. I have a Tack magnetic pre-wound bobbin in the bobbin case, and I've already dropped in my little drop of oil that they want you to do at the beginning of every day. So the top of the design, I can tell from the arrow on the sticker, is this way. So I'm going to hit rotate, and I want to go 90 degrees like that. That's perfect right there. Okay. So I'm going to tell it okay, and I'm going to hit edit end. And now I need to go through and tell the machine what threads to use and when to stop. So I'm going to hit the 3 little spools. Let me get into my thread settings so you guys can see what I've got going on here. So sometimes your screen is not quite the same. So I'm going to go to my settings. I do not have, let's see, I've told it it's isocord. That's it. Let me go to the next page. Yeah. I've got some isocord colors assigned, but I'm not going to use those. It doesn't matter. The machine does not know and does not care what color you have on what spool. The way I do it, it really doesn't matter. This is easiest for me because I move my threads around all the time, and I don't sort or file my colors by number because there's just too many of them, and I have too many brands, and so I just kind of sort them by color versus, you know, the color of the spool as opposed to a number. This is what mine looks like. I'm just going to tell it okay. So I'm going to go into my 3 spools, and you need to know what's going to stitch when. And so this little box right here is a preview, and you can see that this is going to stitch the alignment line for the snowman, and I want that to stitch in black, and I have anchored 6 on white and 5 is black, and those are the only 2 I use that are anchored. So you always want to look at the little preview, and then also it helps if you can print it out. Page 2 of Embrilliance, if you print it out, page 1 will give you the picture of your design, and page 2 will give you exactly what's going to stitch when. But I've already done this once, so I have a clue. So I want it to be 5 in black, and that's fine. And then I'm going to go to the next one. Now, these boxes right here correlate with the spools on the back of the machine. These boxes right here correlate with this number. So this top one is number 1 out of 11 stitches. And I changed the 1 to a 5 by touching number 5. So number 2 is a placement line for the fleece, for my white fleece. And I want that to be done in 6, which is white. My white thread is on spool number 6. And then I want the machine to stop so that I can put my fleece down. Now this is a little bit backwards. You don't tell it stitch, then stop. You tell it stop, then stitch. So it has already stitched number 6. If I want it to stop before it goes to the next one, I have to go to the next one and then tell it, hit the hand and tell it stop. And then it'll stop. It'll give me time to put my fleece down, and I want that to stitch in white as well, number 6. The next one, before it stitches out the placement line for the hat, I want it to stop so I can trim away my fleece because I do not have a pre-cut piece. So you kind of have to think ahead how you want to do this. It's a little bit, it takes a little bit of thought in the beginning, but once you get it, it's going to be so much faster to get this done, okay? So Now, before I've told it to stop. There's my little hand. Stop. I'm going to trim away the outside of the white fleece, and then I want it to stitch the hat placement line in gold, which is on spool number 1. There. Number 5. Before it stitches that, I want it to stop so that I can iron on my little hat. Okay, and then I want it to stitch the tack down line in gold, which is on spool number 1. Okay, and here's the nose. The nose, I don't need it to stop beforehand for me to trim away the hat because I already have, the hat is already cut out. So if you pre-cut your pieces, that's one less stop you're going to have to do because you don't have to trim away the excess. So here's the outline for the nose. I want that to be spool number 2. And then the next one is the tack down for the nose. Before it stitches the tack down, I want it to stop so I can iron my little nose on there. And then the tack down is going to be spool number 2. Great. I should be all done now. So here we are. There is the final satin stitch for the nose. That's spool number 2, the orange. That is the final satin stitch for the snowman. That's spool number 6, the white. Here is the final satin stitch on the hat. That is spool number 1 for the gold. And then there are my little eyeballs, and that's spool number 5 for black. Tell it okay. I'm all done. So if I go back to this, here you can see now what spool number is going to be used for the color, and I have designated that, and I'm all done. I've already told it when to stop and everything. So I'm just touching OK, and I'm going to touch embroidery. Now what I need to do, I need to go back. Let me go to return. I'm going to tell it OK. Now I need to use the camera because I need to make sure I'm going to start the design on center. I'm going to touch the camera, and it says it's going to move. Tell it OK. It's taking a picture. So you can pretty well tell, see the little red crosshair is right on that green crosshair, and that's almost close to where I want it to start. You've got to look real close. Let me get a little pointer here. There is the arrow just above that green. I'm going to move this up just a little bit. That's right on it. And maybe move it down just a hair. That looks really good. That looks really good. I think that's going to turn out just fine. Because you can see here, see the black line right there? I want that right on the edge of the fabric, and this black line right here is right on the edge of the fabric. That black line is that stitch line for the design. So on this machine, you can see exactly what's going to stitch and where. Matter of fact, I'm going to move this up just a little bit and move it down. I think that's perfect. That's a perfect alignment for that right there. I'm going to hit embroidery, and I'm ready to go. So I need to take away the embroidery sticker, the alignment sticker. Now, if you've got the snowman sticker, those are handy too, and that's a different button. I don't have that right now. I wanted to do this for those people who don't have snowmen. Okay, so we're ready to go. I'm going to hit lock and the green button to go. And there it starts with the black line right on the edge of the fabric, exactly where I wanted it to. Perfect. Now here on a single needle is where you would stop and change your thread color to white for the outline. Uh-oh, uh-oh. It's not stitching. What happened? I don't have white threaded. Okay, I need to thread I never did thread my white. I'm going to go back to my threading. I'm on number 6. Do the hook. Yeah, that had come unthreaded on a previous design I was doing. There we go. Tell it okay. And since it had already done a couple of stitches and I didn't have the needle threaded, I'm going to hit the needle plus minus. And I'm going to go back 1, 2, 3, 4. That's fine. Tell it okay. And hit the lock button and go. There, I put the hand there so it stopped, and I'm going to put down my fleece, and I have a piece of Cutaway Stabilizer underneath it to make it more opaque. I learned from the first one that it was not that, that you could kind of see the dark fabric through the white fleece, and I didn't want that. So I'm just going to put this down and hit the lock button and go. Making sure that my fabric completely covers the stitch line. And it should stop. And now it'll stop and allow me to trim away. If you can do it in the hoop, fine. If not, you'll want to take it out and put it on a firm surface and trim away. Okay, so I have trimmed away around the outside of the Snowman fleece. Put the hoop back in, make sure these are in tight, these little clips, because on the sides, if they're not, if that one kind of sits up and off, it'll mess up your registration. Also, make sure it's facing the same way. If you need to take a marker and maybe put front here on this, so you make sure to put it back to the front, or put front right here on this stabilizer, you don't want to put that in backwards. That'll cause you some problems. And now it's going to do the placement line for the hat. I'm going to hit lock and go. So nice not to have to change thread colors. It should stop. I'm going to take my little Steady Betty and pop it right up under here and put my hat on there. This is the Cricut mini iron. I love this thing for my embroidery. Love it. It's nice and hot. And it's small enough that I can just get it exactly where I want. And I'm going to hit lock and go. It's going to do the tack down now. Now, yes, I ironed it down, but the reason you also still want to do the tack down line is so that you can tell if you missed it a little bit, maybe you didn't put your piece right, or maybe it's a little bit short. All right, you guys, we're done. The rest of this, it's got another 12 minutes to stitch, and I don't have to do a thing to it. So I'm just going to let it do its thing. The beauty of the multi-needle. Okay, so this is finished now. I like the way this stitched much better with the SF101 behind it. I'm going to align the next corner and just have to change one thread color to account for the color of the hat, and that's it. Okay, I have rehooped again, and this time I'm going to do a brown hat. So I'm going to go back into my thread spools, and I'm going to touch these until I see where the hat, there's the fleece placement, fleece tack down, hat placement, and let's see, so that's stitch number 4, and I want stitch number 4 to be spool number, which one is that? 8, which is brown. I'm going to tell it 8, so you'll see that 1 switch to an 8. There, just like that. I'm not messing with the hand. And there is my tack down, and I want that to be number 8. And let me get back down to this number 1. That one, because 1 is gold. I'm not doing gold now. I want that outline to be brown, and that's number 8. And I'm all done. I don't have to do anything else with it. I'm going to tell it okay. And embroidery. And we will lock and go. Okay, now that all of the embroidery is finished, it's time to put on the borders. You want to put cornerstones on the ends of 2 of the pieces, according to the pattern. And then when you sew these, you may want to sew with the border on the bottom and the topper on top so that you can miss the tip of the hat right there. You don't want to capture that hat in your border. So I will put this just like this and flip it over. And I'm not going to pin mine, but the way that I make sure that they feed through at the same time evenly is there's a technique I learned from Janet Prey from Islander Sewing Systems, and it's called thumb under, fingers on top, and you go forward like that. And that's the way they do it in industry because they don't have time for pins. So thumb under, both pieces of fabric, thumb under, finger on top, and tip it like this. And then you can use your fingers to guide the fabric through. And you don't, let's see, we've got a point we need to hit right here as well, and I really can't see it through that SF101, so I'm going to put a pin, and then I'm going to take my marker, I'm going to mark that point like that, so you're not sewing blind. That's going to make it a lot easier, and I should hit it just fine there. One of the best things you can do when you're quilting, this is called diagonal seam tape, and I love this. You put the red line directly in line with the needle, and then you have a 1/4 inch over here and a 1/4 inch over here, and it makes all the difference in the world on your accuracy. Because if you can keep it accurate back here, it's going to be straighter as it goes through. So now see how I'm going to aim for that mark. That's good. Let's see how we did. That looks great. I could even have gotten a little bit closer to that tip, but that's fine, and I did not hit the edge of the hat, so that's fine. That'll be fine. That's a good table runner deal for a table runner, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm going to put the other one on now. Make sure it's long enough, both sides. And same thing, I'm going to find my tip where that point is and mark it. That looks real good on that one. See that? That looks great. And I missed the hat. Okay, I'm going to trim these even, the ends even with the runner, the table topper, and then I'm going to sew on the other borders. Okay, we're ready to put on the final borders, and there is nesting that's going to happen because of the cornerstones. So just like nesting before, you would butt them up together and in one side of that seam allowance and out the other, just like that. I'm going to do the same on the other end and get a nice tight nest. Table toppers are a great way to really learn and improve your quilting skills because it's not a quilt. I'm going to go just a stitch or two over the seam allowance, the seam line, so that I know that they're locked by that stitch. And I should have done this from the other direction. So, where is my hat? Ooh, I'm close. I'm going to have to quit. Okay. That hat is right. I barely have any at all, any allowance at all on that hat. It got in way close. Okay. That's all right. We can do it. I need to find the point for that. Done. Let's see. That looks good. And I hit the point. That's great. And I missed the hat. Life is good. I like it. I'm going to iron it out and then we are going to background quilt this. You can background quilt it however you want. I'm going to do the stipple pattern that is in the Brother Luminaire. And I'm going to show you how to do that. You can miss all of the applique that you've done. It's pretty cool.